Hello YouTube. So, as you can see, I do have a slideshow behind me. This is the slideshow that I put together so that I could do a small presentation in front of a selection of teachers. There were around 20 teachers, maybe a little less. I was presenting on autism. So my mom recorded me doing this. It was my first speech ever on the topic. I put it on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, and I got a lot of people who want the slideshow. So it's behind me and it is free for you guys to get to. The link is going to be in the description. I'm also sharing the resource on my link tree. There is a barcode at the end that you guys will be able to scan or share. It's pretty much everything, which I'll explain towards the end. But I wanted to show you guys. I plugged my HDMI cable into my TV from my laptop, which you guys can do this easily. If you wanted to present this at home or something similar to that, you just need an HDMI cable. Or if you wanted to present it in a class or anything similar to that, it's very easy to do so. I did make it on Canva and the design is not my own, but all the things in the slides that I added to it are from the work that I did with looking up certain topics that I wanted to cover and finding information on those topics. But you can see who the work is done by because they have their watermarks on their work, so you can see individually who did what, and you can see my name is tagged on all of the work that I did. So you guys will be able to see that. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and I'm going to go on and show you guys how I would present this, and it will give you an idea of what you can say to people while you're showing them the slides, because there are not really any notes on the slides. I'm also going to have it so that you guys can skip forward to a certain number. Let's go. So this is the first page. As you can see, it's just called Autism 101. It's a compilation of resources that I found. All of this is just an effect of me knowing certain things about autism and looking up pictures to put into a slideshow so I can talk about them. So like I said, there's not a whole lot of writing in this, and I'll get to that, but I am basically facilitating this whole situation. This might be a long video, but I do recommend watching the whole thing, or I will just divide it up so you guys can kind of understand like the little things that you want to teach. This first page just shows you my TikTok, Instagram, YouTube accounts. I also want to state there are some shortcuts on your keyboard that you can use for different things, which I thought was pretty cool. I'm going to share that with you guys now. If you press Q, it makes a shushing face, like a quiet. It's so cool. And then my favorite, I would have to say, is C, which is confetti. I think that's amazing. There's also M, which does a mic drop. And it does have audio. I just have my TV turned down. I'm kind of wondering if A does applause. I'm not really sure because I have my volume turned down. If you press U, it like closes the curtains and then opens them, and there's like a sound of cheering, I believe. Just touch different keys on your keyboard. You can also set a timer by pressing the number keys going down. It's pretty cool, so I just thought I'd show you that. But this is the Who Am I page. My name is Aneva. I am diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, what is considered level 1 autism. I've been masking my entire life because I didn't know that I was autistic. I tried to bridge the gap between neurotypical people and autistic people to get them to see a side of autism that they don't see. So that is what I do. I'm a psychology student, but I have a degree in public health, an associate's degree, and I don't know what to do with it. This slide is just me giving credit to the owners of each individual photo. As you go through, you'll see their watermarks on their own illustrations and their work. It's not necessarily something I went through and made sure is everyone who's sharing this information autistic. I think that the majority of them are. I'm not really sure. I'm just saying, I literally did just throw this together. I was very surprised that people wanted to see these slides. So we're going to start off with what is autism? Autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder, which means you're born with it and it is biological. It's in the brain. It's not in your head. It is not something that can be cured. They don't completely understand autism, but I can tell you what it's not. So you can't really see it, so I will be inserting pictures of the slide. It's not bad behavior or willful defiance, and it's not bad parenting. It does not affect only children, and it is not as common as people are saying it is on the internet when they say, oh, everyone's autistic. Everyone is not autistic, and I will explain that later. It's very frustrating when people say that. What I'm going to do to kind of help you guys understand autism, especially if you're going to be sharing this with someone neurotypical, I do really need to tell you guys that it does present differently in everyone. And so for me, there are a lot of things that you can't see about my autism, because one of the first things that people notice about anyone else is how they look on the outside and also how they speak, how they carry themselves. And the deficits that I see in my autism are not things that you can easily see. I will talk about as I go through this, and you can also see those deficits that I talk about very openly on the rest of my YouTube channel. So here we go. I will share with you a few of the signs. Issues with communication, like when the child doesn't respond to his or her name. Repetitive movements or speech patterns. And also repetitive movements like shaking in different ways that I stem. Things that people could see when I was in public school were me shaking my legs and things like that. Avoiding eye contact. I actually had a family member ask me why I don't make eye contact. I didn't even realize I didn't make eye contact. And looking back, I didn't make eye contact. And I thought it was because I had bad eyesight. But I was really uncomfortable with making eye contact with people. I can do it now, and it's still extremely uncomfortable. And it's not automatic like how it is for most people. I do have an eccentric way of moving. While I'm standing here, I am standing on the sides of my feet. I just realized that. I just tried to be aware of what my body's doing just now so that I could give you an example. I'm also shaking. I'm pretty much always shaking. If I'm not shaking, it's because I'm trying to focus and make it look like I'm not shaking. I'm not trying to focus. I'm trying to make it look like I'm not shaking. Like when I do at work. Sensitive to loud noises. For me, any sudden noises are very disruptive to my nervous system is the way that I like to say it. But overlapping noises or people talking, several people talking at the same time, the prolonged sound of being in a public place, that is very disruptive to my nervous system. Preferring to be alone was the biggest sign of my autism. I wasn't making friends, and I didn't want to. Trouble interpreting what others feel. I still have this. I just don't think I do. But I have really bad theory of mind. I don't know what other people think. I'm almost always wrong. It's very strange because I feel like I'm not wrong. This is the next slide. This is a screenshot from the DSM-5. It's really important for me to mention that this is the book that is used to diagnose all mental disorders in the United States. I'm going to put these on the screen so you can see this really well. I'm going to look at this. Before the DSM-5, which is what you just saw earlier, the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, before the 5th edition of that book was published, you would see these disorders being diagnosed separately from autism spectrum disorder. There's pervasive developmental disorder. I don't know why it says development. I believe it's developmental. Does it really matter? Kind of, yeah. There's autistic disorder, which I don't like the way that sounds, but that was the diagnosis that was given to what people think autism is. That is what people think autism is autistic disorder, which I will explain in a minute. Asperger's syndrome, which is something we don't even want to talk about, which I will explain that in a little bit as well. Asperger's syndrome is what people would say I have. If I were diagnosed before 2013, I would have been diagnosed likely with Asperger's syndrome. Childhood disintegrative disorder. I don't know why it says children. I really don't know, but this was the best diagram I could find. And then there's Rett syndrome. I don't know what Rett syndrome is. I'm being very honest with you guys. Like I said, I threw this together, so I tried to kind of figure out the best way to explain this. But yeah, these diagnoses are no longer given. With the publishing of the DSM-5 in 2013, they are defunct. Anyone previously diagnosed with one of these disorders is autistic or given the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. And that's the end of it. This right here is completely my intellectual property. I'm going to read this to you guys. This page is really important for me to add. I had to really think about it because people don't understand what autism is. There's a large issue the autistic community is faced with where we're told we are not autistic if we do not have what people consider classic autism, or what is formerly known as autistic disorder. These terms are offensive, and many of us choose to not even mention the diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome or other former diagnoses, which were listed previously in slide 5, which is the one right before this, to explain to people what autism actually is. The history of Asperger's syndrome is a dark one, and it is a difficult conversation to have, but I believe it is important to share this information so that the community can be strengthened. Aspie supremacy and lack of inclusion are just two of many results of this divisive language. It is my belief that the majority of people stating that we are not autistic are just not informed of the criteria or reality of what autism is. So going back to the previous slide, this is autism. These diagnoses are autism. So I honestly do believe that neurotypical people, or people who don't understand what autism is, don't understand this concept, that we did not just give ourselves the name of autism. I honestly feel like if more people understood what I just said, we wouldn't have this problem. The autism spectrum looks more like this. It's not just more or less, right? That doesn't really make sense. The wheel makes a lot more sense if you want to call this a color wheel, because here we have proprioception, which is kind of like knowing where your body is, interoception, which is your internal sense of hunger and thirst, emotional intensity, like meltdowns, shutdowns, overload, communication differences, like echolalia. This is not my work. I keep emphasizing this is not my work. I just love this diagram. It's just so well written down. When I did my presentation, I talked about it from my own perspective. When I'm being myself, naturally, I have echolalia. I have dyspraxia, so I don't always know where my body is or where certain parts of my body are, and I have a kind of a weird posture and things like that. And so this is what I talk about. And then stimming and special interests. My special interests are very, very narrow. I only like to do certain things, and when I like those things, I like to only do those things. So it's important to know that's how that would look. And honestly, I wouldn't be opposed to making my own, if there was a little test or something where I could get my own makeup. They probably have that, and you can see a better makeup of that right here. This is more so what it looks like. You guys actually saw me walk up to it in that video and be like, this is more what a profile looks like. And that is more what a profile looks like. Right beside it, I wrote down the levels of autism that someone now would be diagnosed with. There's level 1, where they need the least amount of support, and level 3, where they would require the most amount of support. I've had a comment where they told me that you could be a mix, especially if you have something like a disability on top of that disability, which is autism. You can drive or something like that, but you still require a substantial amount of help. But this is how these things are diagnosed. And what I really emphasize here is that people should not use the terms low functioning and high functioning. And I would say for at least 2 reasons. The first reason being, really what people determine as functioning is how much you burden them versus how much you actually struggle. So it's not even about you, it's about the other person and how affected they are by your disability. And then another reason I would say is because it just sounds so bad to say, oh, well, yeah, she's high functioning, she's high functioning. Another thing it does is kind of just oh, well, you're high functioning, so you don't need any help. You talk to me, you don't need any help, right? The next reason, which I didn't think about it, but there are 3 reasons that I can think of. Low functioning and high functioning just makes people feel bad. If you have someone who really, really struggles, and you say, oh, well, I'm high functioning, that is going into the Aspie supremacy thing. It's very, very hurtful and extremely selfish to even say something like that out loud. It's pretty messed up, I'm not gonna lie. We have person first versus identity first language. If you're not autistic, it is just something really kind to do to address them as being an autistic person. An autistic person versus a person with autism. The next slide is what you can do for when someone's having a meltdown. Finding a quiet space, noise canceling headphones or earplugs, having a safe person to call or go to. On this page, this one actually helps you if you're having a meltdown, or how you can help someone else if they're having a meltdown. Anything special interest related that you can engage with. For me, it's watching the exact same gameplay video. I've watched, it's 3 hours long. I'm not going to say which game it is, but I've watched it probably about 6 times. Calming music or meditation, a weighted blanket, or people around you being understanding. And as for helping someone else who's having a meltdown, you can guide them somewhere quiet, reduce demands, remove any anxiety triggers, offer them time and space, validate their emotions, speak calmly and reassure them, encourage them to ground themselves, understand they may say or do things which they would not usually do. I think that last one is actually really, really helpful. It's a very good point. We're not really ourselves or our normal selves when this is happening, and we're just trying to feel better. Next, we have this warning sign looking thing about meltdowns. Meltdowns are such an important thing to me for people to understand. If you don't deal with it correctly, it will traumatize them. And I remember a lot of the meltdowns that I had, and I can recall them and what happened and what made them so much worse. And I want to point out that meltdowns are not like PMS symptoms. This is not like bipolar mood swing. This is something, it is something that I consider uncategorized as something that neurotypical people experience. They are not within the child's control. Are a result of overstimulation. They're the body's way of purging, are very common in people with autism, and are easily confused with tantrums. For the teachers or for the parents, please don't punish the meltdowns. I would have to probably do like a whole class on this. Remove the stimuli. stimuli. If you can't move the child, remove the things around them. That is pretty much the only thing I can think of. We have more about tantrums, and I really don't know why I put so much in here, but you guys loved seeing that this existed. Involuntary reaction to dysregulation or overwhelm. The child is generally out of control of themselves with a meltdown. But with a tantrum, it's a deliberate choice to achieve a goal. The child generally has some control of their actions. They're aware of their surroundings and safety, and you can reason with a child. Or the child may try to communicate or bargain with the person that they're trying to convince to give them something. With a meltdown, they're unaware of the safety of themselves or others, and you can't reason with them, and the child cannot communicate. They continue with or without the audience in a meltdown. So you don't typically see a child having a tantrum without the presence of other people. But with a meltdown, a lot of us have them in private. They're going to happen. They're pretty much going to happen. You guys can read the slide. It's more of the same thing. It usually stops when the child gets what they want. It usually stops when the sensory surroundings change or when the child wears themselves out. So important, very different. The goal is different. The goal for the child having a meltdown is to not experience that discomfort. The discomfort is so overwhelming that it makes us lose control of our bodies. That is what a meltdown is. A tantrum is a decision. That's not what's happening in a meltdown. People become really confused because they think that autistic people are having meltdowns on purpose. But I'm here to tell you they are completely involuntary, and I can't express that enough. So let's talk about what triggers an autism meltdown. Sensory overload, unexpected changes in routine, unable to express needs, exhaustion from masking, which is a really big one, frustration with social interactions, overstimulation with social interactions, unfamiliar environments, transitions from one activity to another. These are just 8 things. For me, overlapping noises, anything. I had a meltdown because my brother put a tile on our TV remote, and I didn't like the way it looked, and I could not handle the way that it looked, and I had a meltdown. The last episode of Lost didn't end the way I wanted it to when I was 11, and I had a meltdown. Started hyperventilating and everything. With a tantrum, the child is looking at you for a reaction. The example I used is, hey, I want a cupcake. No, Tommy, you can't have a... Why not? Can an autistic child have a tantrum? Yeah. The thing is, you need to know the difference because you don't want to punish a meltdown. With a meltdown, the child's not looking at you for a reaction. With a tantrum, the child is usually considering their own safety. The child having a meltdown is not considering their own safety. The child is making an effort to communicate their needs. If they have a tantrum, I want the cupcake. And with a child having a meltdown, the child is not making an effort to communicate their needs. The child is in control of their behavior with the tantrum, and with a meltdown, they are not. And with a meltdown, the child is unable to calm down after the situation is resolved. So you see continuous crying, or you may see the child just sleeps for a really long period of time because it is extremely exhausting being able to mask and trying to cope with that over time. It looks different, but it doesn't feel much easier. The next couple pages are all about meltdowns and their triggers. I feel like this is very important for teachers and parents. Autistic meltdowns are very intense, involuntary responses to being overwhelmed. Autistic people present differently during meltdowns. Reactions may be physical, like kicking, emotional like crying, or verbal like shouting. Alternatively, they may shut down. They are not tantrums. The individual may temporarily not feel in control of their behavior. So it's different for everyone that is autistic, but it pretty much involves at least one of those things there. Common meltdown triggers are sensory overload, unmet needs, unnoticed hunger or thirst, being unable to express needs, change in plan or routine. You can express whatever you feel comfortable expressing when it comes to the puzzle piece. There's a lot of history with the puzzle piece, but I will tell you what I said during my presentation. I feel like Autism Speaks specifically just pushes this puzzle piece thing and says, help these kids with autism. It's like they take advantage of parents that have autistic children, and I am 100% on the side of parents that have children that are autistic, unless they're abusive, of course. They don't know. They don't know that Autism Speaks does not help their children. They think that they do. They think that this whole puzzle piece thing is a great way to show my child's autistic. And as far as safety goes, like during a traffic stop, I think the puzzle piece is great because most people don't know any other signs for autism. This is the one way to make sure that someone knows that there's an autistic person around or that you support autistic people. Eventually, we will get there. My opinions on the puzzle piece are kind of mixed. I do think it's really cute, and I liked the puzzle piece when I first was diagnosed because I was like, oh, I found the missing piece of my life, which was autism, which I actually got a comment recently. They said the same thing. Always unique, totally interesting, sometimes mysterious. It's okay to be different. I said in the presentation, oh, little baby, you're so cute, come here. Autism awareness. It tells you who we are versus autism acceptance. Tells us that we are welcome. Makes our needs sound less like a special treatment. We're not puzzle pieces, we're not mysteries to be solved. Like I said, you guys can use any of these resources and speak on it the way that you'd like to. These are other signs that you can use. I added more to this because someone said they'd like to learn about the other symbols. So I explained that we like the rainbow infinity. The gold infinity symbol is specific to autism, but this rainbow one actually is just to encompass neurodiversity in general, but also used for autism, depending on the context, I suppose, from what I was able to look up. And then the gold infinity sign is sometimes used to signify autism with a solid gold color because the symbol for gold is AU, like the first two letters of the word autism, which I explained that on my own without using this diagram. I was so proud of myself. So yeah, I really like the gold infinity symbol because gold on the periodic table, which is really, I like it. I wasn't a chemistry person, I failed chemistry, but I memorized the symbols on the periodic table. I just memorized all of them. And I always thought it was cool that gold was AU, but I think it's cool that we used it for autism. I believe this is the same. I don't remember. Do I have that? I don't know. I probably didn't cite that source. If you guys know more about Autism Speaks and you guys know more about this whole history of the puzzle piece, please do teach on it. This is literally just here because I thought it would be helpful, and I mentioned Autism Speaks. For Autism Speaks' budget, this was the year for 2022. 1% of their budget went towards family services. They're not really helping anyone. Of course, like I said, I don't know too much about Autism Speaks. I did just throw this together. If you guys want to support me, this stuff is here. You can scan this to get to this slideshow. There's many different ways to share this. You can just copy the link. You can do whatever. But one of the easiest ways is to scan this. You can also scan this to get to my link tree where you will also see this on there. But basically, you can scan this for all of my socials. That's Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. You can also get to my Cash App if you would like to donate. This is absolutely free. It's a free resource. If you want to support me, you absolutely can do that. I stream nightly except for on Sundays on Twitch. I completely unmask there. I also have my gaming channel. There's a whole lot on my link tree. I do a lot of things. If you'd like to support me, you absolutely can. I would really appreciate it. Please do share this slideshow and this video with everyone that you'd like to know about autism, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching, and bye.